You're tuned in to the program The Real Africans with Nhira, the African Queen Diva. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're talking about COVID-19, and my question that I posed to you: should Africa take the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine? Should Africa take the vaccine? So I'm going to be talking to quite a few people that I've invited to the show. 5 of them, and I'm going to be introducing them as we go. The first guest is Tivani Mashamba Thompson. She is a medical scientist, a professor, a deputy dean of research from the University of Pretoria in South Africa. Remember, University of Pretoria is actually the biggest university in Africa, and I'm so proud to introduce her to you today. And mostly because, of course, she's a professor and she is a medical scientist, because for the past few episodes of this program we have been talking about COVID-19 and the vaccine, but now we actually have a scientist in here on the show who is going to be sharing and hear your views, because I would like to hear from every single person from whichever background you're coming from. I want to know your views about this topic. My name is Nhira, the African Queen Diva. Thank you so much. I am introducing you now to Tivani, who is already holding on the line. Hello, Tivani. Are you on the call?
Yes, I'm on the call. I can hear you clearly now.
Hi, Tivani. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Annie?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for being a part of this program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm just going to ask the first question before we get into it. Could you kindly just introduce yourself and tell us exactly what you do? Because a lot of people may not really understand what a scientist is and what a deputy dean of research actually does at the University of Pretoria. So in just a few sentences, 1 or 2 sentences, just kindly introduce yourself.
Yes, so my name is Tivani Mashamba Thompson, and I currently work as a professor and a deputy dean of research for the Faculty of Health Sciences in the University of Pretoria. So I also, by background, my profession, I'm a medical scientist. A medical scientist in the sense that we work on diagnostics of diseases and also optimize all the biomedical aspects relating to biomedical science. So I've worked in pharmaceutical science. I have a master's in pharmaceutical science, and I have a PhD in public health medicine. So my expertise, my professorship is in point of care diagnostics. But today I'm happy to be talking about vaccines, and I'll be using my pharmaceutical science knowledge in that.
Okay, brilliant. So the first question that I'm going to quickly pose to you, as a medical scientist, do you think the necessary precautions have been taken into account in preparation and the approval of the COVID-19 vaccine?
So the preparation of the vaccine is not something I've been involved in, but I have been reading a lot of evidence around this. The evidence, the scientists that have been working on vaccines have been very transparent, and they've been sharing evidence with everybody in the world through, scientific manuscripts published in journals. From what I have read, the vaccine, the approach to development of this vaccine, it's very valid approach, and the methods that were used were very good methods. And the vaccine is targeting a part of the virus that enables the virus to enter our cells. And when the virus enters our cells, that's when it's able to mount an immune response, and actually that's when we then become sick. So by designing a vaccine that attacks that part of the virus, which is the protein called spike protein. It means it disables the virus from entering our cells and causing a disease. And that approach is what most of the vaccines that are being developed is using. They're using that approach, most of them. So I believe from the science that I've read that the methods that are being used are very good methods, and they're going to help protect us from future infections if we take a vaccine. But saying that, remember, all medications, no medication is 100% safe. A vaccine is a type of medication that will be administered in the body. Some people will react to it, some people won't. But also remember, this is not the first vaccine we know of in Africa. If you know from your childhood that most of us, I don't know if this happens throughout South Africa, but in South Africa, almost everyone must get a polio vaccine as a baby. And
yes, we also do. From Zimbabwe, we also do have a mark on our left shoulders. All of us.
Yes, it's one of the vaccines that is like widespread all through Africa, and nobody challenges that. I don't know many people who challenge the polio vaccine because they've seen what polio does, and we are now seeing what coronavirus is doing to our people. So anything that can help prevent these deaths, I think should be welcome. But in terms of, are we all going to, react positively to this vaccine? I mean, it's a vaccine. It's like a drug. Not everyone's going to. It's not going to agree with everybody's body. There might be a minute percentage of the population that reacts to it, but so far, we don't have evidence on this. On the side effects or adverse effects of this vaccine, because it's still quite new and the development of vaccine is still ongoing. So there are also different types of vaccines. So we're waiting to see. We have to give it a couple of months before we can talk about how the people react to that vaccine, or whether they must take it, because there might be a percentage of the population that clearly would react badly to that vaccine and shouldn't be taking a certain type of vaccine. But I welcome the vaccine. I think, if it's proven to work for African people, we should all take it.
Have you already taken the vaccine yourself and your family?
The vaccine is not yet available in South Africa, and when it does become available, there's also they have different categories of people that will be prioritized. So I probably will be at the end of the queue and might not even get the vaccine in 2021. So I also don't know anyone who has received the vaccine in South Africa thus far.
Okay. So we hear that there's about 8 to 10 million vials of the vaccine that have already been administered in the world. Are you starting to see any positive? Okay, so you've already spoken about some people who have taken it. Are there any positive results from those vaccines so far? Because we haven't really seen anyone or a group of people who have said they have actually taken the vaccine and they do not have COVID-19 anymore, and they are completely healed and they are fine and they're healthy. We have not had any statistics of that. Do you, from the medical field, maybe you have that information of some people who have actually taken the vaccine and have actually come out in the open to say, we have taken the vaccine and I'm fine and I'm COVID-19 free?
Oh, thank you for that question. So I know very few people. I mean, like, these are close friends or family members that are outside of South Africa. They're in the US or UK who have actually taken the vaccine. This is because they are healthcare workers. And I keep track, I keep checking with them how they're feeling, if there are any adverse effects or anything that, their body's reacting to it badly. So far, from the very small number that I know, I haven't heard of any adverse effects of this vaccine. But remember, it does have 5 people that I'm talking about. So I cannot, say this. That's evidence that the vaccine works very well for everybody. We have to have large enough number of people from different population groups, because a vaccine, we might find it now is being administered very well outside of Africa, and the majority of the people that are receiving this vaccine are not even Black Africans, and then they are reacting positively to it. And then when it comes to you never know, when it comes to Africa, you might find that because of our genetic makeup, a certain genetic makeup, we don't react positively to it. So let's wait and see what happens. But I also think that with the studies that are happening, they would be able to from the trials, right? The trials will be able to show that how the vaccine is received by different population groups.
All right. So by trials,
before they even roll it out, they don't have that information.
So when we're talking about trials, is this trials on actual human beings to test, or it's going to be where is it going to be tested? So let's say the vaccines are here. From your medical perspective, are we going to test on actual human beings? And if they get affected, let's say maybe they die, how is that going to work out exactly for us to actually know that the vaccine works and then it can be used internationally or nationally?
So in drug development or vaccine development, first the vaccine or drug will be tested in a lab, and they'll use cells to see whether it's toxic or not. And then it will go on to animals, right? Maybe rats. And then they will also take it to the next step where they test it animals that have close genetic makeup to humans. Only after that it will go to human beings. So at this stage, most of the vaccines that you hear about and they even have names are actually at a trial stage where they're using human beings as samples. So right now, most of the trials are on human beings, but no vaccine can be taken that has been shown to be toxic or just cells by themselves or on animals that are closely related to human beings can be now given to human beings. There will be a lot that will be started to make sure this is maybe 99% safe on a human being before it goes to it. But then again, it doesn't happen that when that particular medicine or vaccine goes and get tested on a human being that, people react negatively. That is why these are called trials. And when you go onto a trial, they will explain to you the risks. That this may not work and this might work, and then you are just volunteering to help medical science, the progression of this medical science intervention.
Okay, so I've heard actually that there is also conflict within the medical fraternity. There are some medical practitioners who are not comfortable to even take the vaccine, and some who are comfortable to take the vaccine. So from your own perspective as a health expert, how confident are you that this vaccine is definitely going to work, and why is there some form of conflict within the medical fraternity? If you are, like, for example, definitely you are a scientist and you know more about vaccines and all these medication, you have the medication background, but why is there conflict? Because as a doctor, as a scientist, you're the people that are supposed to be very confident that, what, this is the best vaccine. Because we're looking at how many years of research that have been there, less than a year of research, and trying to come up with this vaccine. All of a sudden, within just a few months, there's a vaccine. Right now, we still don't have a vaccine for cancer. We still don't have a vaccine for HIV and so many other diseases. But for COVID-19, within 6 months, according to what we know and what we have read, the vaccine is out. How confident are you? And why is there conflict between the medical fraternity people? Some wanting to take it and some are not even confident to take it themselves. Why do you think that there is that conflict?
Thank you, Annie, for that question. Yes, that's a concern not only to to the general public, also to medical scientists and all the biomedical scientists. It's a concern because this vaccine was mainly developed very quickly to respond to this very deadly pandemic. So no one really would like to see a fast-tracked vaccine administered at all. But we all want a solution right now. And we know with technology has advanced a lot, to help us make these developments and approvals go quickly. And I can understand your concern about, vaccines against cancer and other things. When you look at the population or the number of people that are dying of cancer in comparison to COVID-19, you can't compare those two numbers. So this is also based on how much loss are we making. The whole world economy is also affected by this pandemic. Our everyday life is affected by it. You just told me you banned yourself from steaming twice a day. Is that normal to spend your life steaming? Is it normal not to have weddings, not to have funerals? So you're looking at the impact, how this is impacting. They're looking at how this is impacting everyday life, impacting economy, and how it's just going to finish the whole human race. So to compare that to the HIV vaccine and cancer vaccine, it's a reasonable concern. But look at the impact of this.
So that concern made the people who are involved in actually creating vaccines to move a little faster at a faster pace because of the losses. So yes, from that perspective, remember, I don't take the right answer. I don't say this is the right answer or the wrong answer, but we are just we are talking, and we are we're looking at all the different perspectives, which is really great.
So I'm also not in a position. I'm not one of the people who are giving approvals to vaccines or making vaccines at all. But I'm trying to put myself in their shoes to see what would make somebody make such a decision.
Yes.
And you look at the impact of the pandemic itself. My whole lifetime, I've not seen anything that has impacted me like this psychologically. Anyhow, everything. You can't function.
You can't. That's true.
And you also every day you wake up wondering if you are alive or you are waking up as a ghost. You're not sure because you're hearing of so many deaths. So
exactly,
you wake up every day. You are grateful that I'm not the chosen one to go. So the anxiety, everything, it affecting us quite a lot. But at the same time, we have to also make sure that we put pressure on our scientists that are developing vaccines, that we want these vaccines to go through the right channels and also to be tested in a appropriate way. The first is concerned to all of us that if you're saying other vaccine must take more than 5 years, this one should take 6 years. So are you following all the precautions? And from what I've read, it seems like the appropriate precautions were followed and everything was done appropriately. But it's all going to be, we were all going to see the results of that maybe in the next 6 months, 12 months, or even a couple of years when we see the impact of this vaccine, whether people are reacting negatively or positively to it.
From your own medical background, you're a medical scientist. I love it. I'll be honest, I'm honored because I don't know a lot of medical scientists who are females, especially no gender. I'm not I'm not trying to be funny or anything. I'm actually very impressed that I'm speaking to a medical scientist who's a woman, because it's not about gender, but because come on, in our African culture, most of the doctors that we knew long back in a few years ago were actually male, and then to get an actual scientist who is a female and a mother and a wife, that is impressive, I must say. Moving on, I just wanted to ask, you're very much welcome. As a medical scientist, do you think here in Africa we can actually also just create our own vaccines? You shouldn't. You don't have to talk about what we will put in there or whatever. We don't know who's listening, definitely. But just from your own perspective, as an African strong woman that I've come to know, do you think we can have our own scientists like you who can actually create our own vaccines? And why are we not doing that right now?
Yes, thank you. We are more than capable of doing that, and I'm actually very disappointed that the scientists, talking from a South African perspective, who have been attempting to put together interventions such as vaccine and other response interventions, have actually not received much support. And it's one of the biggest barriers or challenges for scientists in Africa as a whole is that from my experience, there's not a lot of support and funding locally. We always have to rely on support from outside if you want to do strong science like developing biomedical interventions like vaccines. You cannot start a vaccine plant or a vaccine laboratory with just $1 million Zim dollars. You need a hell of billions and billions, which if it's not coming from your local government, then you can't do it for your country. So there's no external funder who's going to fund you to develop a vaccine for your country under your country's name, and then under your name too, your invention. That has to come from your own government and your own country, or it has to come from your parents' wealth, and most of us don't come from wealthy
families. Yes.
So if you're not if you're not wealthy and you're not able to do that yourself, the government needs to be able to provide that. And then our government, from my own experience, there's not a lot of funding that we get locally. And if you want to do great science, you have to collaborate with the external, pharmaceutical companies or funders externally that are not really interested in building your country. They are building their own countries and their own farms, not you. You are not their priority. Your country is also their priority, and they're rightfully so. They have to look after themselves too. It's their money.
Okay. I would like you to just hold on, because I'm just about to add a few more people to our discussion. So if you can just hold on, I'll be speaking to you in a bit. Thank you so much, Tivani Mashaba Thompson. I still want your contribution, and just hold on for a few more minutes, and then we're going to get people in.
Okay.
If you just tuned in, this is the Real Africans Talk and Music Show. And my name is Nhira, the African Queen Diva. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you are getting those messages coming through on +277 201 08733. I'm talking to Tivani Mashamba Thompson. This program, and today we're talking about COVID-19, and the question of the day, this is actually part 4. The question is, should Africa take the vaccine? And we've just been talking to Tivani, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Tivani Mashamba Thompson, who is a medical scientist, a professor, a deputy dean of research at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. And now we've just been joined by Mr. Gilbert Makotore, who is a business mogul. He was with us last week in countries like Rwanda, Kenya, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Hello, Mr. Gilbert.
Hello, the Queen Diva. How are you doing today?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your time.
That's fine. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So you've been listening to the conversation that I've been having with Tivani Mashaba. Tivani, am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Tivani or Tivani?
Tivani.
Tivani Mashamba Thompson, who is okay, Tivani. It's Venda. Is it Venda?
It's Tonga.
It's Tonga. Okay. All right. Tongas and Shonas, we're almost the same. We're related somehow. I'm sure we're related somehow.
Yeah, sure.
All right, Mr. Gilbert, you can go right ahead.
No, thank you so much, and greetings to you, Professor Tivani. It's an honor to have you on the program, and I was listening very attentively to your very informed and educated contribution to the program. But me, I'm speaking on behalf of the lay people on the street, and why we have some sort of reservation when it comes to the vaccine and what has happened. I was also listening very attentively to Ernest. He was going through the fan page, and people were, posing their contributions on the fan page. I took note of those too. So briefly, probably without wasting much of your time, maybe let's just dive into it. The question that was posed was, should Africa take the vaccine or not? And the professor came on and spoke very eloquently as to what has been happening in the medical fraternity as to, try and eradicate the pandemic that we have at our hands. But you see, the reason why Africans and probably brown-skinned people have had a natural antipathy against this vaccine is not unfounded also. We have to start to understand things from their perspective. I think the professor will concur with me that if we look at some medical journals that have been written, that I've been going through online myself, just going through, like, for example, you can talk of the Tuskegee experiments that spoke of over 6 vaccines. And there was a serious analysis as to where these vaccines have gone wrong. If you look at the rubella virus, the rubella vaccine, measles, pertussis, Haemophilus influenza, the hepatitis vaccine, all these vaccines in the medical journals, they were seen to have a race and ethnicity. It was seen that in these vaccines, race and ethnicity affected antibody responses at a higher rate compared to the European and whites. To black and brown skinned people, their antibody responses were affected at a higher rate. If you look particularly to hepatitis B, hepatitis vaccine, white boys were 64% less likely to have autism relative to non-white boys. So with that background, with that backdrop, people are saying we have had all these other vaccines. I think the thing that they are missing is, as the learned professor was educating us, probably in the 80s when the vaccines for polio and measles and all these came, there was no media that was covering and informing people that, maybe these are going to be trial drugs or whatever. So people just got what they got at that time. And they were, you would understand that from an African perspective, a hospital was starting to be deemed as a place where you go to get saved. So no one ever thought or had a mindset that it could be an experiment happening in a hospital. So now that this information is abundant on social media and platforms, people are now starting to question, number one, the real need for us to have a rushed vaccine and stuff like that. But I would want to point this point out and probably throw it back to the professor. The real bone of contention is the language on how to prioritize the administration of the vaccine. There is an overt and a covert attempt to push this on blacks and browns, this vaccine. If you look at the CDC journal, which is the Center for Disease Control journal, you see they talk of things, they use terms like racial justice to administer it to black people first and brown-skinned people, and an advantage. And how is it a racial justice to sign up first for an experimental biological agent with zero track record? How is that racial justice? So you speak, if you continue reading the report of the CDC, they use terms like the disenfranchised members of society, racial and ethnicity minorities, those with disabilities, underinsured people who work in schools and nurses, prioritizing blacks and Latinos first. This is the Center for Disease Control journal in the United States of America. So why is that language wrong? Because we have been told by medical professions like my sister on this program that the most vulnerable groups to COVID-19 scientifically are people with pre-existing medical conditions. Number one. Number two, they are people who are the elderly, people who are maybe 75 years and above. Three, people who are staying maybe in nursing homes when you take maybe the first world type of setup, you see. So why are these people not being prioritized when it comes to the vaccines, and Africans and brown-skinned are being prioritized? Why are these people with pre-existing medical conditions being prioritized? So that becomes the bone of contention. If you look at maybe the hhs.gov website for strategies for administering the virus, you see that there is an avid attempt to target. This is the language. I'm speaking of what is in the report. So these are not my words, right? There is an avid attempt to target the black population. They speak of media manipulation. They speak of silencing of oppositions or people who oppose the virus. They speak of obviously the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and their contribution there. Then to add an icing on top of the cake, they then bring these celebrities, of which Obama, the former president of the US, is one of them who's there on their page, who now do this live vaccination on TV or something like that. So all these things now give us concern. You know, I was just laughing, I think about a week ago. I bumped into an interview by, I'm sorry, I'm going to mention his name, and forgive me if I offend the wrong people, but I ran into who's the CEO and chairperson of Pfizer, which is one of the companies that is manufacturing this drug. And a question was posed on CNBS News Network when he was being interviewed. He was asked, did your company cut corners to make this drug? And he said, we developed the vaccine without cutting corners. Then the next question from the journalist was, are you going to be taking the vaccine yourself? Then he said, there is no reason for me to take that vaccine because I don't fall in the category of people that should take the vaccine. But I looked at his profile. This is a 59-year-old man. He might not have medical conditions as he claimed on the interview, but basically is now going towards that age. So if you are producing a product that you cannot consume, to us in our African culture, because we're brought up
it raises eyebrows, yes.
Witchcraft and everything, and we knew that witchcraft can be given to you through the food you consume. So if I come to your house and you cook something for me and you don't eat yourself, I start to question whether I should eat that food. So that on its own starts to raise questions that probably may.
Hello?
Hello, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I think we lost him. I'll have to bring him back. So what do you have to say about what Mr. Gilbert Makotore just said so far from your own medical perspective?
Yes, I was listening very carefully, and I really sympathize with him, and I hear his concerns. What I can say is I actually have not read the reports that he has read, and also did not listen to the interview that he he listened to of this developer of a drug, of a vaccine. What I can say is, the misinformation is everywhere. And also, when we read reports and articles, we have to read, and not just one. We read multiple ones and then look at, take a conclusion from all of them, not just one article and take one side of the story. So with regards to the misinformation, there's a lot of it out there. I mean, you go to the internet, you get, like you told me, that people are saying different things. But what I can say is from what I have seen in South Africa, from a South African perspective, where you have different races living in one country, we're not seeing what is observed by Gilbert. We are, the priority groups are not. There's no race involved in that. People are prioritized based on their
you're coughing.
groups,
Hey, Professor, you're coughing.
So,
your cough, Professor.
Yes, I'm coughing. Yeah, we still do cough. Even during the COVID era, we
actually, you know what? Right now with this COVID-19, the moment that you cough, we're already thinking, I need to stay away from you. But you see how uninformed we are. Like you're talking about the information. We don't have the information. And we need people like you from a medical background to tell us. Because now, at the moment I cough, I think I'm dying. Because there's not enough information.
You want to die, yeah. So it's also anxiety. What I'm sensing from Gilbert also is the anxiety, the worry and everything. I understand that, but we need to understand that look at things from both sides. Look at things from both sides of from the story, and also it's important for you to be judgmental. You're a human being, but from a South African perspective, I have not seen what was observed by Gilbert, and I sympathize with him, and I hope that's not happening in other parts of South Africa or even in the US. But, I don't think the US population would accept that, and it would not be even ethical for that to happen. Yes, some of them can write reports and write things, but ethically, that no country would accept. Not in this day and age.
Go on. We're done. So we have. I was just talking about the information and how much information we have so far, which is very limited about COVID-19. We have someone who's also holding, one of the panelists who are holding, that I'm going to ask about this. He's a TV content producer. I don't know, there's some noise in the background there. I'm not sure who it is. But if we could just try to kindly limit the noise in the background. So he is a TV content producer and a motivational speaker and a business mogul. We're talking about Mr. Simon Nyarungwe. Hello, Mr. Simon Nyarungwe.
Hi, Anne, and hi to your listeners and viewers.
Loud and clear.
And good evening again to the professor.
Professor Tivani, or she's...
Hello, good evening.
Yeah,
hello, and good evening.
Thank you so much, Professor.
All right, Mr. Simon, we're just, I'm sure you've been listening to what Tivani Mashaba Thompson has been saying, and also Gilbert Magotore has been saying. And I would like to quickly, before you get into that, I would like to quickly pose a question. She also just mentioned, Mrs. Thompson just mentioned about a very important aspect, that we need information. We need to read more than one article. We need to do more research than we're actually doing right now, because we're moving around in our own tangent because of some person or one person or two people who have written what they've written or said what they've said about COVID-19 or the vaccine and other conspiracies, and we're just running with it. So you, from the background of media background, rather, and journalism background, because those are very tied together. Do you think there's enough information that is actually coming out to the public about COVID-19 and about the vaccine that gives us the confidence to take the vaccine?
I don't think so. I really think that there is a lot of misinformation that is peddling around, and it's actually quite detrimental to the distribution of the vaccine, because information is coming one-sided, and no one really is taking time to really research onto a certain point or to a certain notion that he might take to make sure that if for instance, whatever he is saying or what he has read is true. So I think the role of social media, in peddling information or misinformation is quite huge and significant. But right now we are sitting with a pandemic that is threatening to wipe out half of our people, and we still don't have enough information how to deal with it and how when something has been done. Because remember, when the first outbreak of the virus came, people were crying for the vaccine. Right? People were crying, hey, why can't we have treatment? Why can't we have something just to stop this? Now there are signs that the things are there, and still there is a section, the kind of vaccine because of information that they have got. How true the information is another thing. So, but in this sense, what I'm seeing and I'm discovering is that we let's look at media, for example. Media is a big tree, right? From where we come from, there was conventional media, whereby if a story comes before it's flighted to your newspapers, for example, your TV stations, there was an editorial that takes place whereby things are fact-checked. So before any story, before any breaking news is being put out there, it goes through an editorial process whereas those kind of things like fact-checking, like looking at the other side of the story, there's always two sides to a story. That's what we are doing. So that's the conventional way of the media dissemination of information in the conventional way. Fast forward to 2021, we've got social media. It's good. Social media is good. I don't know the last time that I was watching news on television. Most of the news that I get it on Twitter. You get news on Google News. So there are tools that have made their life easier for us, especially news people and journalists, to disseminate information. But
do you think we can rely on that before you go any further? Do you think we can actually rely on social media news? Don't you think that's where we're also getting it wrong? Now, some are telling us to steam, some are telling us to take this and take that. Trust me, everyone has all these different concoctions, and some are saying we don't want to take the vaccine because of what has been said on social media. Some are saying, yes, we're going to take the vaccine because of what has been said on social media. So do we have an actual reliable source, and how ethical and how much integrity is in the information that we're getting from social media?
Let me answer you in two ways. Right. In terms of this pandemic, there is so much fear of the unknown.
Yes.
Right? That everything that you are told right now tends to be true, because you just don't, you want this thing to go away. Right? So if someone will tell you to steam 4 times a day, you're not going to steam because of that kind of fear of the unknown, basically. Right? But coming back to your question, I think there is a yes and no in my answer, because remember when I was saying that social media, there is no editorial, it means if I think that I've got a point, like right now I was Googling and I found information about what Mr. Gilbert was saying, and I take a stance that simply says I am correct because I've taken it from Google. I have not checked the issue, so it becomes true to myself, but it might not be factual.
Exactly.
It might not be factual. So,
exactly. Yeah.
So
you coming from my question is, you're coming from a media background, but you're also relying on information that you get from social media. I'm trying, maybe you have a way to maybe disseminating or trying to figure out which information is true and or not before you disseminate the information. But what about a layman who just goes on social media and looks at this video that was made by someone? Like today, I just received a voice note from some man who is in a Zimbabwean actually, who is in South Africa, who is talking about some vaccine at the taxi rank. There's no names there. There's no further information, but he says some people have just died. And imagine from a layman's point of view, you get that information, you start disseminating that information, but is it factual? You don't know, you have no idea. But this person has gone to all social media platforms and spreading the stories, whether they're true or not, but there is integrity involved, and there is also factual. It must be factual for us to actually talk about it, and for us to make an informed decision on whether we're going to take the vaccine or not. That's why I'm saying, since you also mentioned about social media, how reliable is it for us? Because now we're relying on you, the media fraternity, to help us to disseminate the right and the correct and the factual information. How is that? How is that been so far?
The difficulty in social media is that someone can just write whatever they can, and then peddle that, and that is not fact. That is not there's no truth in whatever they're saying. All right, I want to come back and say, we are noticing that with social media there is a populistic tendencies. One wants just to be popular by peddling this because I'm going to trend and I'm going to have followers, right? Mm-hmm. I'll have so many followers and I'll have so many hits on YouTube. But how factual is what you are peddling out there? It has not been tested. It has not been tested. The vaccine, if we are getting professors coming to us and telling us there is transcripts that says the vaccine has been tested in the corrected way or manufactured in the right way, who are we then to say no, but this other vaccine did not work in 19 and so there are no facts. So the onus is now on the developers of the vaccine to give us confidence and say this is the pros. In any vaccine there is cons. These are the pros, and I would think that there is so many pros on the vaccine than the cons. Because whether we like it or not, people are dying, and
yes.
people that are so close to you are dying, and we can't just keep quiet, and because we are scared that this has happened, or information that is not true that is being heard on social media is very, very difficult for us to take that up.
Mr. Gilbert,
just to add to what he is on the vaccine. Remember, when any drugs that are developed outside of our countries or even inside our countries, before a drug is approved for use, every country has a regulatory body for drugs that make sure they do the tests inside their laboratory and do all the toxicity tests to check for all the different types of toxicity for that drug before the drug is administered in their country. And that is important to know. And I'm pretty sure that every African country does have that body, especially Zimbabwe and South Africa should have those too, because they do have scientists that serve in those regulatory bodies. I'm not sure if it's all over Africa, but I'm pretty sure Zimbabwe and South Africa do have those regulatory bodies. And we shouldn't, we are at the mercy of those bodies, that they are the ones that are going to approve the drugs to get in the countries. We already are living on drugs. Perhaps most of you and I now, before we sleep, we're going to take a paracetamol or something. We should worry about those as well. We can't just worry about the vaccine and then not worry about everything else that we are taking.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting.
I don't know if I can come in.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. Welcome on board, Mr. Simon. Thank you so much for your very learned contributions, and I really appreciate all the. I've been taking notes really and learning from you. I would want to agree with you on the notion that social media, in as much as it is a good tool, it is also something that can be used as a destructive tool because of the failure to have that editorial body or checks within the social media stream. But I think last week we because when we speak what we speak, we're not speaking what we're taking from Google, we're speaking what we're seeing in medical journals and official Ministry of Health websites, where I think personally, I don't know if I might be wrong, where I think personally, that's where any person should go to and get the correct information about COVID-19. But then, if the right people don't communicate effectively, then they leave room for the wrong people to whisper the wrong things in the ear.
Exactly.
We were looking at a particular government Ministry of Health website where they were just telling people to put on masks and all the other things that they were talking about. And you see, we want to be very objective when we're dealing with this matter, and also not to be emotional, but factual. Okay? My learned friend, the professor, was saying, look, she hasn't read the journals there, but, obviously I know in her profession, she knows that there is something called the Tuskegee experiments. Probably she hasn't gone through it like she says, but she knows that. And she knows that they are in a formal medical journal. This is not like Google stuff. So when we're speaking of this kind of fear or unwillingness to commit to this, is because we are understanding that this vaccine has not yet been said to be definitive. I think the professor was speaking briefly, I was taking notes here, where she was saying when the drug is administered, the first trials are done on rats or animals, then we'll move from the animal stage. So this is like the first stage of a human trial that we're talking about. So the reason why we're saying this is the first, the reason why we're saying we're a bit skeptical is because it's still the first stage. The scientists, like my learned professor here, is still going to learn from the effects of the drug on people that are going to receive it now. It's not like this is the perfect cure. It has been tested and it has been approved and is ready for the market. No. This is still an ongoing experiment that's there. The question becomes, why is the target population becoming too big towards the African continent? Why are all these things happening where indemnity forms are being signed against African governments to say, look, sign indemnity? We are not speaking gossip. This is reality. This is the truth of what is happening.
Yes.
You understand? So at the end of the day, we don't want to shy away from reality because we want to pretend to be modest or something like that. We want to hit the nail on the head. This is a thing that is going to affect, you see, our generation got affected by the decisions that the generation before us made. And this generation is going to be held accountable by the next generation for the decisions that we make or the lack thereof. So we cannot keep quiet when we're dealing with this. We have to be very pragmatic and focus on these things and really analyze and say, look, would I take food stuff that I haven't yet verified? You see, like for example, I grew up in the rural areas. So we used to collect mushroom from the bush and we bring it home. But before, the whole family was fed with mushroom because, as you know, mushroom is very poisonous. Sometimes unpoisonous mushroom can become poisonous because of the way you handle it. After cooking mushroom in a pot, what we would do is we'd dish it and give it to the dogs first before we ate. And 4 or 5 hours later, if the dog is still running around and is healthy, then everyone can eat. So this is the same procedure that my learned professor was talking about, where we have to follow due process. And she has spoken well and said each country has got, regulatory bodies that control the administration and acceptance of different drugs from other countries. But the question is Africa's laboratories good enough or able to deal with the issue of really testing these, finding their effects? Do we have enough the equipment? Because like now, you see everyone who gets sick in Africa has to fly out if they have money. They have to fly out and go abroad, even though we bank on South Africa to be maybe one of the safe health havens in Africa. But if you see, in comparing South Africa, looking at other African countries in light of the effects of COVID-19, it is one of the countries, it is actually the country that has been hit most in Africa by the pandemic. And this is because of probably things that we discussed last week of, genetically modified foods and things. The real issue here, my brother Simon, is we are running away from the reality. What COVID-19?
I'm not sure if I agree that South Africa is the most affected country or any other African countries. What I'm noticing, and it's actually a question that I'm posing out there, is that countries that have better surveillance systems are able to count, detect, and test, and have the numbers presented and published. So because they do have the resources to have the surveillance system. So this also brings me back to your question and your concern about, certain African countries not having the appropriate resources to even regulate the drugs. You understand? So I think what we are seeing even in the entire world is that where we have countries that have resources to count and test and diagnose are showing us higher numbers. I remember when the high numbers were shown in America and nothing, very little in Africa, I was very skeptical. And even in South Africa, I look at South Africa from different provinces. You will see higher numbers in Cape Town, Joburg, very little in Limpopo. Limpopo, that's very linked to Joburg. But because of the resources that are limited in Limpopo, we see lower numbers. So we shouldn't take that too much in our heads and start, letting our guards down in how we protect ourselves against this pandemic. It's affecting us equally because we are moving around a lot. This is we are very mobile here in Africa. So if it's affecting someone in Joburg, it's affecting all of the people in Harare. So we shouldn't let our guards down. We are connected.
Yes, on that point, Professor, I want to support you and also show you another thing that I did, because I thought about that, what you said, and the availability of resources to test and check people in South Africa probably might be the contributory factor to the high numbers that we are seeing in South Africa. And it seems like in other countries where the resources are not readily available, there is nothing. So I went deeper and I said to myself, okay, naturally, let's take from the year 2000. How many deaths were happening in each and every African country a year? Annual deaths, just normal people dying every day. For example, in Zimbabwe, here you find
that you don't even know what's killing the people because they are not being diagnosed. And even during COVID, they are dying. You don't know what's killing people. It's just a normal hunger and everything. But it's actually, you would never even know if somebody is dying of malaria or COVID. It's a difficulty.
Yes, the point that I was going to make, Professor, is this, and you correct me because you are the medical expert. I was saying I was looking at the death rates per country per annum from the year 2000 till 2020, right? Every year, every country records. This year, in Zimbabwe, for example, the figures have been ranging from around 10,000 deaths to about 17,000 deaths. So I then said to myself, if there is a disparity or a movement from 17,000 to above, then we have to factor in the aspect that, at least that is an effect of COVID. COVID is involved. So if you look at the death figures for the year 2020 in Zimbabwe, they went to about 18,400 recorded deaths. And usually we have about 17,500 to 17,300 deaths every year. So the disparity was...
we call that excess death. And that's another way of actually determining the impact of this pandemic in different countries that do not have diagnostic systems. Like even here in South Africa, the way we look at how Limpopo, like we know that diagnostics and health resources are limited in Limpopo. The way we look at how it's been impacted, we look at access, the excess there. So, some people are not being counted.
So you actually think, Tivani, think that the statistics of the COVID-19 cases in South Africa right now may not be the actual numbers?
Sorry, it's not it's not even actual numbers. You know of a lot of people who are even against testing. There's a huge amount of people who are not even tested when they have symptoms. And they would rather die than go to a hospital. We know of many of those. And there's no way the statistics are accurate. So, but I think we may be going off topic a little bit now. If we can go, this is another topic for another day. We can.
No, why I'm asking it? It's actually interesting because it is part of what we're discussing, because we're discussing about the vaccine. Because right now South Africa has, according to what we know, South Africa has the highest number of people who have been affected by COVID-19. So exactly. So it is very important as well, because now South Africa is one of the first countries that are targeted, or rather chosen to be the first countries that are going to receive the vaccine because of the numbers. So if we're saying that the numbers are not correct, it still brings me back to the issue of how much information are we getting, and is it the correct information? Are we having the right numbers? So if we're saying that the cases of COVID-19 in South Africa may not actually be correct, that means that maybe South Africa is not the first country that should take the vaccine. So it takes us all the way around. There's no right answer and there's no wrong answer. I'm going to give you, Mr. Gilbert, I'm going to give you an opportunity for you to finish quickly. But I needed to address this because it's also very, very important. And you know why people are skeptic? This is one of the reasons why people are skeptic. People are confused. Now, if we're saying that the numbers are not correct, that means I'm in South Africa and I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable right now,
Annie, if I can come in, the numbers, I'm not saying they're incorrect. I'm just I bring you in to use your common sense. It's impossible to get accurate numbers.
I understand that.
Not that what the numbers that you are given are not, it is impossible. Even there's no country that can give you the accurate number of people who are actually actively positive with COVID now, because we know how people are behaving around this pandemic. So to say, in terms of South Africa, comparing South Africa, this came from us comparing South Africa and other African countries. And my response was, we can't even talk about that, because even in South Africa alone, I'm giving an example, resources that are places that have higher resources and places that have lower resources.
Yes.
You see a variation in numbers, no matter how connected those places are. And I gave you an example of how connected South Africa and Zimbabwe are, but still the numbers are from Zimbabwe are very, very low.
Very low.
Because the systems for counting, diagnosing
are different.
Are not there. So you cannot say the percentage of people in Zimbabwe is so low compared to South Africa, because you really, I don't systems testing and surveillance are that, optimal in Zimbabwe. Even South African systems are not optimal.
I totally agree with you. And yes, go on, Mr. Gilbert.
To America.
Yes, go on, Mr. Gilbert. So yes, I agree with you, Tivani, because I'm saying that maybe Zimbabwe actually needs the vaccine first. I'm not saying that they should start with Zimbabwe, but I'm just saying because of the information that we're getting is also not entirely accurate.
Yeah.
So it could be Zambia, it could be Tanzania, it could be any other country, but because we don't have the full information.